Imagine living in a country where the law protects only the rich, where a nobleman's word outweighs the lives of hundreds of ordinary people, where families go hungry while lavish banquets are held just a few miles away. Eventually, people stop asking for justice. They start demanding revenge. That was France in the late 18th century. For years, ordinary people had endured crushing taxes, hunger, and humiliation, while the aristocracy lived in unimaginable luxury. Every injustice added another spark. Every abuse of power tightened the spring a little further. Everyone could feel something coming. No one realized how much blood it would cost. This is a tale of two cities. Explain the story that Redefined sacrificed. Charles Dickens wasn't simply fascinated by this period of history. He saw it as the perfect setting for a timeless question. What happens when suffering lasts so long that it transforms good people into something else? To answer it, he introduces us to a man who had already lost almost everything. A prison without walls doctor. Alexander Manette was once one of France's most respected physicians. He was intelligent, compassionate, respected. Then one day, he disappeared. No trial, no explanation, no chance to defend himself. He was taken to the Bastille, one of the most feared prisons in France. And he remained there for 18 years. Try to imagine that. 18 birthdays, 18 winters, 18 years, without knowing whether anyone even remembered your name. Eventually, prison changes you. Not just your body, your mind. By the time Dr. Manette is finally released, freedom feels almost unfamiliar. Instead of celebrating, he spends hours making shoes. Nobody asks him to. Nobody pays him. He simply can't stop. It was the routine that kept him sane behind prison walls. Now, even outside those walls, his hands continue the work. Dickens understood something psychologists still talk about today. Sometimes people escape the place that hurt them, but the place never escapes them. For Dr. Manette, the prison now lived inside his mind. Then something extraordinary happens. A young woman walks into the room. She isn't a stranger. She's his daughter, Lucie Manette. When her father disappeared, she was only a baby. She grew up believing he was dead. Now, after nearly 2 decades, father and daughter meet for the first time. There are no dramatic speeches, no cinematic embrace, just quiet recognition, gentle patience, and the fragile hope that even the deepest wounds might begin to heal. For the first time in years, Dr. Manette has something the Bastille could never give him back: a reason to live. But Dickens isn't finished asking difficult questions. Because while one man is slowly recovering from the past, another is busy destroying his own future. 2 men, 1 face. A courtroom in London. A young Frenchman stands accused of treason. His name is Charles Darnay. If he's found guilty, he'll likely be executed. The evidence looks convincing. Witnesses swear they've seen him carrying secret information between England and France. The courtroom is ready for a conviction. Then, everything changes because of one unexpected detail. Another man is sitting quietly among the lawyers. His name is Sydney Carton, and he looks almost exactly like Charles Darnay. The resemblance is so uncanny that the witnesses suddenly seem unreliable. Had they seen Darnay or Carton? No one can be certain anymore. That tiny crack in the prosecution's case is enough. Charles Darnay walks free. At first, this feels like an ingenious courtroom twist. But Dickens has quietly planted the seed for something much bigger. These two men share the same face. Yet they couldn't be more different. Charles Darnay appears to have the life anyone would want. He's thoughtful, kind, honorable. Despite being born into one of France's most powerful aristocratic families, he rejects its wealth and cruelty. Rather than benefiting from a broken system, he chooses to build an honest life of his own. Sydney Carton is the opposite. He's brilliant. Everyone knows it. His legal mind is exceptional. Yet he spends his evenings drinking away his potential. He's sarcastic, cynical, aimless. Most people see a failure. The tragedy is, so does he. Carton doesn't think his future is worth saving. And that's exactly what makes him one of literature's most unforgettable characters. Because this isn't really the story of Charles Darnay. It's the story of a man who believes his life has already been wasted. A man who has no idea that history is preparing to give him one final chance. And he won't see it coming until it's almost too late, if Dr. Manette is the soul of this story. Lucie Manette is its heart. She isn't the kind of heroine who wins battles with a sword or changes history with political speeches. Her strength is quieter. But in Dickens' world, quiet strength can be even more powerful. Where others see broken people, Lucie sees people worth saving. You can already see it in the way she cares for her father. She never tries to erase the 18 years he lost. She doesn't tell him to move on. She simply stays beside him, patiently helping him build a new life one day at a time. It's a reminder that healing isn't usually dramatic. More often, it's someone choosing not to give up on you. That quiet compassion turns the Manette home into something rare, a place where damaged people begin to feel whole again. Before long, two very different men find themselves drawn there. One is Charles Darnay. The other, Sydney Carton. Neither of them realizes it yet. But every choice they make from this point forward is leading toward the same moment. A prison cell in Paris. Two men fall in love. Charles Darnay falls in love with Lucie almost immediately. It's easy to understand why. She sees the best in people, even when they can't see it themselves. But Darnay carries a secret. He was born into the Redefined family, one of France's most powerful aristocratic dynasties. A family feared not because of its wealth, but because of its cruelty. Darnay wants nothing to do with that legacy. He rejects his title, leaves France, earns his own living in England. He believes a person should be judged by their choices, not by the family they were born into. It's an admirable belief, but history rarely forgets. And sometimes, neither do people. Before asking Lucie to marry him, Darnay decides he must tell Dr. Manette the truth. Everything. His family, his name, his past. But Dr. Manette stops him. Tell me after the wedding. It's a small moment, easy to overlook. Yet it becomes one of the most important decisions in the entire novel. Because some truths become more dangerous the longer they are delayed. The man who believed he was beyond saving Sydney Carton also falls in love with Lucie. But unlike Darnay, he never imagines she could love him back. In his own mind, he has already lost. One evening, he visits Lucie alone. What follows isn't a declaration of love. It's a confession. Carton tells her she has awakened something inside him he thought had died years ago. Hope. Not because she promised him a future, but because she reminded him that he could have become someone better. It's one of Dickens' most honest moments. Carton doesn't ask Lucie to choose him. He doesn't try to ruin her relationship with Darnay. Instead, he asks for nothing. Then he makes a promise that seems impossible at the time. If the day ever comes when I can save you, or anyone you love, I will. Whatever it costs me. Remember those words. Because Dickens wants you to remember them. They'll come back in a way that's impossible to forget. A fragile happiness life moves on. Charles and Lucie marry, Dr. Manette smiles more than he has in years. Their home fills with warmth. And eventually, with the laughter of a child. For a brief moment, it feels as though this story might avoid tragedy altogether. But while one family builds a peaceful life in London, France is falling apart. The distance between the two cities is only a few hundred miles. The distance between their futures is becoming impossible to measure. Across the Channel, years of anger finally erupt. Crowds pour into the streets. The Bastille falls. The monarchy begins to crumble. At first, many people celebrate. After all, the people finally have a voice. For generations, they had lived under crushing inequality. Now they believed justice had finally arrived. But Dickens asks a question that still feels unsettling today. What happens when justice stops caring about mercy? When victims become judges at first, the revolution promises freedom. Then, it starts demanding enemies. Not just guilty people. Entire families. Entire classes. Entire bloodlines. The guillotine, originally introduced as a more humane form of execution, quickly becomes the symbol of a nation consumed by revenge. Every day, another blade falls. Every day, another crowd gathers to watch. Executions become routine, almost ordinary. Dickens isn't saying the people's suffering wasn't real. It absolutely was. He's asking something more uncomfortable. Can people who have endured unimaginable cruelty avoid becoming cruel themselves? No character answers that question more chillingly than Madame Defarge. You first meet her sitting quietly in a wine shop, knitting, watching, saying very little. She doesn't look dangerous. That's exactly what makes her dangerous. Because every stitch records another name, another enemy, another person she believes deserves to die. She isn't driven by greed or power. She's driven by memory. Years earlier, her own family was destroyed by the Evrémonds, the very family Charles Darnay was born into. Unlike Dr. Manette, who slowly learns to heal, Madame Defarge feeds her pain until it becomes her identity. She no longer dreams of a better future. She dreams of revenge. And she isn't finished. Not even close. One letter changes everything just when Charles Darnay believes he's escaped the shadow of his family. A letter arrives from France. An elderly servant who once worked for the Evrémonds has been arrested. He begs Darnay for help. It's an impossible choice. Stay safely in England, or risk everything to save an innocent man. Darnay chooses to go. He believes the revolution will judge him by his actions. He couldn't be more wrong. The moment he steps onto French soil, he's arrested. Not because of what he's done, because of who he is. And as prison doors slam shut behind him, hundreds of miles away, another man quietly decides to cross the English Channel. Sydney Carton. The promise he made years ago is about to be tested. A prisoner of his name, the moment Charles Darnay arrives in Paris. He realizes he has made a terrible mistake. The revolution doesn't see the man standing before them. It sees the name he carries. Redefined. To the revolutionaries, that one word is enough. It doesn't matter that he rejected his family's wealth. It doesn't matter that he left France years ago. It doesn't matter that he has spent his life trying to do the right thing. History has already reached its verdict. He's thrown into prison. And suddenly, Dickens asks a question that still echoes today. Can you ever escape the past you were born into? Or are some people condemned before they even speak? Hope arrives. Briefly, when the news reaches England, Lucie doesn't hesitate. Neither does Dr. Manette. They leave for Paris immediately, for Dr. Manette returning is almost unbearable. Every street reminds him of the years stolen from him. Every stone carries a memory. But something unexpected happens. The revolution sees him not as an aristocrat, but as a victim. He survived the Bastille. He suffered under the old regime. To many revolutionaries, that makes him a hero. For the first time in years, his pain becomes useful. Using the respect he has earned, Dr. Manette manages to secure better treatment for Darnay. Then comes the trial. The courtroom is tense. The judges listen. Witnesses speak. Dr. Manette pleads for justice. And against all expectations, Charles Darnay is declared innocent. For one beautiful moment, it feels like the nightmare is over. Lucie rushes toward her husband, Dr. Manette smiles. Even the audience exhales. Then Dickens does something brilliant. He pulls the floor out from under everyone. The letter hidden inside the Bastille before Darnay can leave. A new piece of evidence is brought into the courtroom. Not from an enemy. Not from a spy, from Dr. Manette himself. Years earlier, while imprisoned in the Bastille, Manette secretly wrote an account of everything that had happened to him. He hid it inside the prison walls. When the Bastille fell, the letter was discovered. Now it's read aloud. The courtroom falls silent. In the letter, Dr. Manette describes a horrifying crime. Two powerful aristocratic brothers abused their position to destroy an innocent family. When Manette tried to expose them, they had him imprisoned without trial. Then comes the revelation that changes everything. Those two brothers were members of the Redefined family, Charles Darnay's family. The courtroom doesn't care that Darnay had rejected them years ago. It doesn't care that he tried to live differently. In the eyes of the revolution, blood is guilt. The verdict changes instantly, death. It's one of Dickens' cruelest twists. The very man trying to save Darnay unknowingly becomes the reason he is condemned. When justice becomes revenge at this point, the novel stops asking who is right. Instead, it asks something much harder. What happens when justice forgets the individual? The revolution began because innocent people suffered. Now, another innocent man is being sentenced. Not because of what he has done, but because someone who shared his surname committed terrible crimes decades earlier. Dickens isn't defending the aristocracy. He's warning us about something much larger. Hatred rarely stays focused. Once it becomes powerful enough, it starts looking for new victims. The same people who once demanded fairness now cheer another execution. The machine they built no longer asks questions. It only asks for names. And Charles Darnay's name has already been written down. The man nobody notices while everyone else fights openly. Another figure moves quietly through Paris. Sydney Carton. No speeches. No grand entrance. Most people barely notice him. That's exactly how he wants it. Carton spends his days watching, listening, learning. He visits prisons. He studies the guards. He memorizes routines. At first, Dickens never tells us why. And that's intentional. Because sometimes the most important plan in a story is the one the audience isn't allowed to see. But there is one clue. Carton keeps thinking about a promise he made years earlier. If ever my life could protect you, or anyone you love, I would give it. Back then, those words sounded like the hopeless dream of a broken man. Now, they sound like instructions. The real hero hears what makes Sydney Carton extraordinary. He isn't brave because he feels no fear. He isn't noble because he's perfect. He isn't a hero because destiny chose him. He's a hero because for the first time in his life, he chooses to become one. That's what makes him feel so real. Most heroes begin their stories with courage. Carton begins with regret. Most heroes spend their journey discovering their strength. Carton spends his discovering his worth. And just when it seems there is absolutely no way to save Charles Darnay, he notices something everyone else has forgotten. The courtroom noticed it months ago. The audience almost forgot. Charles Darnay and Sydney Carton have almost the same face. Suddenly, the impossible doesn't seem impossible anymore. What first looked like a coincidence now reveals itself as Dickens' masterstroke. The resemblance wasn't a courtroom trick. It was the key to the entire novel. And Sydney Carton finally understands why fate made two strangers look almost identical. One of them was always meant to save the other. The choice the night before the execution. Carton makes his decision. Not because he expects recognition. Not because anyone asks him to. Not because he believes history will remember his name. He does it because, for the first time, he has found something more important than himself. Tomorrow, one man will walk out of prison. The other will never leave. And Dickens is about to deliver one of the most unforgettable endings ever written. The exchange the next morning. Sydney Carton walks into Charles Darnay's prison cell. For a moment, neither man speaks. They both know time is running out. Then Carton quietly reveals his plan. Darnay is horrified. No. He refuses immediately. How could any decent man accept another person's life in exchange for his own? But Carton has already made his decision. This isn't a debate. It's a farewell. Working quickly, he overpowers Darnay just long enough to carry out the plan. He changes their clothes. He places Darnay's unconscious body into the care of trusted friends. Within minutes, Charles Darnay is being smuggled out of Paris with Lucie, Dr. Manette, and their young daughter. The guards never suspect a thing. When they return, they believe the prisoner sitting quietly in the cell is Charles Darnay. It isn't. It's Sydney Carton. The man who once believed his life had no value has finally found something worth dying for. The walk outside. Paris is strangely calm. The revolution has turned death into routine. Another cart. Another list of names. Another execution. The crowd gathers as it always does. Some cheer. Some watch in silence. Others have become so used to the spectacle that they barely look up. Among the prisoners is a young seamstress. She notices something unusual. The man beside her seems peaceful. almost too peaceful. Looking at him, she quietly says, "I think you are not the man they are looking for." Carton doesn't answer directly. He simply smiles. She understands. Not the details, but the truth. Someone else has been given another chance to live. As fear begins to overwhelm her, Carton reaches for her hand. He doesn't offer false hope. He doesn't pretend everything will be all right. He simply stays with her. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't defeating death. It's helping someone else face it alone. Together, they walk toward the scaffold. No applause. No dramatic music. Just two ordinary people taking their final steps. It's one of the quietest scenes Dickens ever wrote. And perhaps the most powerful. A better thing as Carton approaches the guillotine. His thoughts aren't on himself. They are on the future. He imagines Lucie and Charles growing old together. He imagines their daughter living a life untouched by the hatred consuming Paris. He imagines a son who will one day bear his own name, not because anyone owes him a debt, but because love has remembered him. For the first time in years, Sydney Carton feels complete. Then Dickens gives him words that have echoed through generations of readers. "It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known." It's one of the most famous endings in English literature. Not because it's tragic, but because it's hopeful. Carton can't undo his mistakes. He can't relive the years he wasted. He can't become the man he wishes he had been. But he discovers something even more important. A single choice can redefine an entire life. Why this story still matters at first glance. A Tale of Two Cities looks like a novel about the French Revolution. But that's only the backdrop. The real story is about what suffering does to people. Dr. Manette responds to unimaginable trauma by slowly learning to trust again. Lucie answers pain with compassion. Madame Defarge allows grief to harden into revenge. And Sydney Carton transforms regret into redemption. Each character faces the same question: what will you become after life breaks you? That question is just as relevant today as it was in 1859. Because every generation experiences its own version of the best of times and the worst of times. Technology changes. Governments change. The challenges we face change. Human nature doesn't. We still wrestle with anger and forgiveness, justice and revenge, despair and hope. And that's why this novel refuses to fade. Not because it's old, but because it understands people. The greatest revolution, when most people think about A Tale of Two Cities, they remember the French Revolution, the storming of the Bastille, the guillotine, the chaos in the streets. But Dickens leaves us with a different revolution, a personal one. Sydney Carton doesn't change a nation. He changes himself. He proves that no matter how many mistakes you've made, your final choices still matter. That redemption isn't something you're born with. It's something you choose. Maybe that's why readers have returned to this novel for more than 160 years. Not because it tells us history, but because it reminds us that even in humanity's darkest moments, ordinary people are still capable of extraordinary goodness. And perhaps that's the most revolutionary idea of all. If this story changed the way you think about sacrifice, redemption, or the French Revolution, let me know in the comments. Do you believe one selfless act can redeem a lifetime of regret? I'd genuinely love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy exploring timeless classics through cinematic storytelling rather than classroom summaries, subscribe and join us. There are hundreds of remarkable stories waiting to be rediscovered. Until next time, thanks for watching.